One of the most powerful mistakes people make in relationships is believing that the more they chase, the more they will be valued. When feelings are strong, it is natural to want more communication, more reassurance, and more closeness. But there is an important psychological truth that many people discover too late. Constant availability can sometimes hide your value instead of highlighting it. When someone always has unlimited access to your time, attention, energy, and emotional support, they may begin to see those things as guaranteed rather than precious. This is where the power of absence begins to reveal itself. Human nature often works in unexpected ways. People tend to appreciate things more when they realize those things are not automatically available. This does not mean playing games or pretending not to care. It means understanding that healthy relationships require balance. If one person is constantly chasing while the other simply receives attention without effort, the emotional dynamic becomes uneven. Over time, the person doing all the chasing may lose confidence, while the other person may lose appreciation. This is why stepping back can be so powerful. When you stop constantly initiating every conversation, stop explaining your worth, and stop fighting for someone's attention, you create something that was previously missing space. And space has a unique ability to reveal value. As long as someone is always present, their absence cannot be felt. But when they pull back and focus on themselves, the other person finally has the opportunity to experience what life feels like without their constant presence. Many people fear this silence because they believe that if they stop chasing, the connection will disappear. But if a relationship survives only because one person is carrying it alone, then the problem is not the silence. The problem is the imbalance. Healthy relationships involve mutual effort. Both people should contribute to maintaining the connection. When one person constantly fills every gap, the other never has to make an effort. Silence changes that dynamic because it shifts responsibility back to where it belongs. The psychology behind this is simple. When someone who has been consistently present suddenly becomes less available, the brain begins to notice the difference. Familiar routines are interrupted. The messages that always arrive no longer appear. The attention that was once guaranteed becomes uncertain. This uncertainty often creates reflection. A man begins to remember the conversations, the support, the laughter, and the emotional comfort that your presence provided. He starts recognizing things he may have previously taken for granted because he is now experiencing their absence. What makes this especially powerful is that genuine value is often discovered through contrast. People do not always realize how much someone contributes to their life until that contribution is no longer there. The emotional support, encouragement, attention, and care that once seemed ordinary suddenly become noticeable because they are missing. Silence creates the opportunity for that realization to occur naturally. At the same time, stepping back benefits you as well. Instead of spending all your energy trying to earn someone's attention, you begin reclaiming your focus. You stop measuring your worth by their response time, their level of interest, or their actions. You start investing in your own happiness, goals, and growth. This shift is important because true confidence comes from knowing your value without constantly seeking confirmation from others. The most powerful silence is not rooted in anger, revenge, or manipulation. It is rooted in self-respect. It comes from understanding that your presence is valuable and that people should have the opportunity to choose it rather than having it constantly placed in front of them. When you stop chasing, you allow reality to speak for itself. And sometimes, it is only when your presence is no longer guaranteed that someone finally realizes how much your absence truly hurts. One of the biggest misunderstandings about silence in relationships is the belief that it is a weapon. Many people assume that becoming silent means trying to punish someone, manipulate their emotions, or force them to react in a certain way. But true silence, the kind that creates respect and emotional impact, is not rooted in revenge. It is rooted in self-respect. There is a profound difference between using silence to control someone and using silence to protect your own dignity. One comes from insecurity, while the other comes from strength. When emotions are involved, the temptation to chase answers can be overwhelming. If someone becomes distant, stops making an effort, or begins taking you for granted, your first instinct may be to call more often, send longer messages, explain your feelings repeatedly, or try even harder to gain their attention. This reaction is understandable because nobody likes uncertainty. We naturally want clarity, reassurance, and connection. However, there comes a point where constantly pursuing someone begins to cost you something valuable. Your self-respect. The rare individuals who understand the power of silence recognize that they cannot force someone to appreciate them. They cannot convince another person to care through endless explanations. They cannot talk someone into valuing what they refuse to recognize. At some point, continuing to chase becomes emotionally exhausting because it places all the responsibility for the relationship on one person. Silence becomes powerful when it is chosen as a boundary rather than a tactic. A self-respecting silence sends a very different message than an angry silence. Angry silence says, "I'm trying to make you suffer." Self-respecting silence says, "I refuse to abandon my dignity to earn attention." The first creates conflict. The second creates respect. When you stop begging for understanding, stop arguing for your worth, and stop forcing conversations that the other person clearly does not want to have, you communicate something important. You show that your value is not dependent on their response. This mindset is powerful because confidence is attractive. People naturally respect those who respect themselves. When someone sees that you are capable of walking away from unhealthy dynamics rather than constantly chasing validation, it changes the emotional balance. You are no longer acting from desperation. You are acting from self-worth. That difference is often felt more strongly than any words you could say. Another reason self-respecting silence has such a strong impact is that it creates emotional clarity. Constant communication can sometimes hide the truth. When one person is always reaching out, fixing problems, maintaining contact, and carrying the emotional weight of the relationship, it becomes difficult to see who is genuinely invested. Silence removes that distraction. It reveals who is willing to make an effort and who has been relying on you to do all the work. This kind of silence also protects your emotional health. When you constantly seek attention from someone who is unwilling to give it freely, you place your happiness in their hands. Your mood begins depending on their actions. Your confidence rises and falls based on their responses. Over time, this creates emotional dependence. Silence breaks that cycle. It allows you to reconnect with your own identity, your own goals, and your own sense of worth. Most importantly, self-respecting silence reminds you that love should never require you to lose yourself. A healthy connection should involve mutual effort, mutual respect, and mutual care. If someone truly values you, they should not need endless reminders of your worth. They should recognize it through your actions, your character, and your presence. The truth is that silence becomes powerful, not because it makes someone miss you, but because it reminds you that your value exists whether they recognize it or not. And when your silence is guided by dignity instead of desperation, it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. One of the most difficult lessons to learn in relationships is that sometimes the more you try to hold everything together, the less the other person understands your value. When you are constantly reminding, forgiving, fixing problems, initiating conversations, and carrying the emotional weight of the connection, you unintentionally make it easy for someone to take your presence for granted. Not because they are necessarily a bad person, but because human beings often fail to fully appreciate what is always available. This is why one of the most powerful silence rules is allowing someone to experience the natural consequences of their own choices. Many people spend so much energy trying to prevent distance that they never allow the other person to feel what that distance actually means. They send the first message every time. They check in constantly. They keep conversations alive when the other person puts in minimal effort. They make excuses for behavior that repeatedly hurts them. Over time, this creates an unhealthy pattern. One person becomes responsible for maintaining the entire connection, while the other simply responds whenever it is convenient. The problem with this dynamic is that it removes accountability. If someone knows that no matter how distant they become, you will always return, always initiate, and always repair the situation, they never have to confront the reality of their actions. They never have the opportunity to experience what life feels like without your constant effort holding everything together. Your silence changes that. When you stop rescuing a relationship from every uncomfortable moment, something important happens. The responsibility shifts. The other person can no longer rely on your endless availability to maintain the connection. They are forced to face the consequences of their own choices. If they have been neglecting the relationship, They begin to experience the emotional emptiness that neglect creates. If they have been taking your attention for granted, they begin to notice its absence. This is not about punishment. It is not about trying to hurt someone or make them suffer. It is about allowing reality to teach lessons that words often cannot. People rarely change because they are told to change. They change when they experience the results of their actions. Sometimes a person does not fully understand your value until they are forced to navigate life without the support, care, attention, and emotional presence they once had easy access to. There is also an important benefit for you in this process. When you stop carrying all the responsibility, you gain clarity. You begin to see whether the relationship has genuine mutual effort behind it. If someone truly values the connection, they will notice the distance and make an effort to close it. They will reach out, communicate, and invest energy into rebuilding the bond. If they do not, then their lack of effort reveals information that endless chasing would have hidden. Many people fear letting go because they worry they will lose someone forever. But constantly holding on to someone who refuses to contribute equally can be just as damaging. Silence gives both people an opportunity to reveal their true level of commitment. It creates space for honest actions rather than endless promises. The reality is that emotional consequences are often stronger than explanations. You can tell someone 100 times that you feel unappreciated, overlooked, or taken for granted. But when your presence is no longer there to fill the gaps, they experience the truth firsthand. They begin noticing the conversations that no longer happen, the support that is no longer available, and the comfort that is no longer guaranteed. That realization can be powerful because absence often reveals what constant presence concealed. People suddenly see the value they overlooked, not because someone forced them to, but because they experienced life without it. And sometimes the strongest message you can send is allowing someone to feel exactly what their choices have created in your absence. One of the most transformative silence rules is learning to shift your attention away from someone else's actions and back toward your own life. When emotions are involved, it is easy to become consumed by thoughts about another person. You start wondering what they are doing, who they are talking to, why they have not called, why they seem distant, or whether they are thinking about you. Before long, your emotional energy becomes centered around monitoring their behavior instead of improving your own life. This is where many people unknowingly lose their power. The rare individual understands that the most effective silence begins when your focus changes from watching someone else to building yourself. When a relationship becomes uncertain, many people spend countless hours checking messages, analyzing social media activity, replaying conversations, and searching for hidden meanings in every interaction. The problem is that none of these activities create growth. They may temporarily satisfy curiosity, but they do not improve your confidence, your happiness, or your future. In fact, they often increase anxiety because your emotional state becomes tied to factors you cannot control. The moment you decide to redirect that energy, everything begins to change. Instead of wondering what someone else is doing, you begin asking yourself what you can do to improve your own life. You start focusing on goals that may have been neglected. You invest time in your health, your career, your education, your friendships, and your personal growth. Little by little, your world becomes larger than the relationship itself. This shift is powerful because confidence grows through action. Every time you accomplish something meaningful, learn a new skill, improve your physical well-being, or make progress toward an important goal, you strengthen your sense of self-worth. You begin realizing that your happiness does not depend entirely on another person's attention. You discover that fulfillment can come from many different areas of life. This realization creates a kind of emotional freedom that is incredibly attractive. Interestingly, this is often the point where people start noticing you differently. When your life revolves around gaining someone's attention, you can unintentionally project neediness. But when you become genuinely engaged in your own growth, your energy changes. You appear more confident, more fulfilled, and more independent. Not because you are pretending to be those things, but because you are actively becoming them. Another important reason this silence rule works is that it removes emotional pressure. When someone feels that your entire happiness depends on them, they may feel overwhelmed by the responsibility. But when they see that you have a meaningful, fulfilling life of your own, the dynamic changes. You are no longer asking them to complete you. You are sharing your life rather than depending on them to create it. This mindset also protects you from emotional disappointment. If your entire focus is on another person's actions, every small change in their behavior can affect your mood. A delayed message can ruin your day. A lack of attention can damage your confidence. But when your life is filled with purpose and personal goals, one person's behavior has less power over your emotional state. You remain grounded because your sense of value comes from within rather than from external validation. Perhaps the most important part of this journey is that it helps you become the best version of yourself. Whether the relationship improves or not, you win. You become stronger, wiser, more capable, and more fulfilled. Instead of waiting for someone else to choose you, you choose yourself. Instead of putting your life on hold, you continue moving forward. The irony is that people are often most attractive when they stop trying so hard to be noticed and start focusing on becoming the person they genuinely want to be. Growth creates confidence. Confidence creates presence. And presence naturally draws attention. And when your life becomes so meaningful that it no longer revolves around someone's approval, your silence stops feeling empty and starts becoming powerful. One of the most fascinating aspects of human psychology is that people tend to value what they still have the opportunity to discover. Curiosity is a powerful emotional force. It keeps people engaged, interested, and mentally invested. Yet many individuals unknowingly remove all mystery from a connection by constantly sharing every thought, every emotion, every plan, and every detail of their daily lives. While openness is important in healthy relationships, there is a difference between genuine communication and excessive availability. One of the most effective silence rules is understanding that mystery creates curiosity, while constant updates often eliminate it. When someone knows exactly what you are doing every minute of every day, there is very little left to wonder about. Every thought is shared immediately. Every emotion is explained in detail. Every activity is documented and communicated. Over time, this can reduce anticipation because nothing is left to the imagination. The mind naturally becomes less curious when all information is constantly available. Silence changes this dynamic by creating space. It allows moments to exist without immediate explanation. It allows people to think, reflect, and wonder. This is not about intentionally hiding things or playing manipulative games. It is about maintaining a healthy sense of individuality. It is about recognizing that your entire life does not need to be constantly broadcast in order to be meaningful. The human brain is naturally drawn to unanswered questions. When information is incomplete, the mind often tries to fill in the gaps. This is why people think about unfinished conversations, unresolved situations, and unanswered mysteries far more than they think about things that are completely predictable. When you are constantly available and constantly providing updates, there is no room for curiosity to develop. But when you step back and allow some space, the other person's imagination begins to engage. A man who once knew every detail of your day may suddenly start wondering what you are doing. He may think about where you are, what goals you are pursuing, what experiences you are having, and whether your attention is focused elsewhere. These thoughts are powerful because attention often grows where curiosity exists. The more someone wonders about you, the more mental space you begin to occupy. What makes this particularly important is that mystery often increases perceived value. People tend to appreciate things more when they are not constantly available. Again, this is not about becoming distant or cold. It is about maintaining balance. It is about understanding that a healthy life includes personal interests, private goals, meaningful experiences, and moments that belong to you rather than being immediately shared with everyone else. Another benefit of mystery is that it encourages genuine interest. When every piece of information is given freely without effort, people can become passive. But when some details are discovered naturally through conversation and shared experiences, the interaction becomes more engaging. The other person begins asking questions, showing interest, and making an effort to learn more. This creates a healthier dynamic because curiosity encourages participation. The most attractive form of mystery is not created through secrecy. It is created through purpose. It happens when you are genuinely focused on your own life, your growth, your ambitions, and your happiness. You become less concerned with constantly updating someone because you are actively living. Your energy shifts from seeking attention to building a fulfilling life. Ironically, that is often when people become most curious about you. People are naturally intrigued by those who seem content, confident, and engaged in meaningful pursuits. They want to understand what drives them, what inspires them, and what occupies their time. This kind of curiosity creates emotional interest because it reveals depth. It suggests there is always more to discover. And when your life becomes rich enough that you no longer feel the need to explain every moment of it, your silence begins to create the kind of curiosity that words alone never could. The most powerful silence is not the silence that follows an argument, a breakup, or a disappointment. The most powerful silence is the one that happens while you are quietly transforming your life. Many people make the mistake of trying to prove their worth through words. They explain what someone lost, remind them of everything they did, and hope that enough conversations will finally make the other person understand their value. But true transformation teaches a different lesson. It shows that actions often speak with a strength that words can never match. When someone hurts you, overlooks you, or takes you for granted, the natural reaction is often to seek validation. You want them to see your pain. You want them to understand what they lost. You want them to recognize your value. The problem is that the more energy you spend trying to convince someone of your worth, the less energy you have available to actually increase it. This is why the strongest response is often not an explanation, but a transformation. Transformation begins when you stop making another person's attention the center of your life. Instead of focusing on what they think, what they feel, or whether they miss you, you begin focusing on yourself. You invest in your physical health. You strengthen your confidence. You pursue meaningful goals. You develop new skills. You improve your mindset. You build a life that feels fulfilling regardless of who is watching. This shift changes everything because your growth is no longer dependent on someone else's approval. What makes this approach so powerful is that it is authentic. You are not pretending to be happy. You are creating happiness. You are not pretending to be confident. You are building confidence through action. You are not trying to appear valuable. You are increasing your value by becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable. This kind of growth creates a presence that people notice naturally. Many people underestimate the impact of visible progress. When someone remembers you as a person who was constantly seeking attention and later sees you thriving independently, it creates a powerful contrast. They notice the confidence, they notice the happiness, they notice the growth. Most importantly, they notice that your life continued moving forward. This realization often speaks louder than any message you could have sent. There is also something deeply attractive about self-improvement because it reflects strength. Anyone can talk about change. Far fewer people are willing to do the work required to create it. Real transformation requires discipline, patience, and commitment. It happens through consistent effort over time. Every healthy habit, every goal achieved, every challenge overcome becomes evidence that you are investing in yourself rather than waiting for someone else to validate you. Another important aspect of transformation is that it shifts your emotional focus. Instead of obsessing over what someone else is doing, you become occupied with your own progress. Your attention moves toward opportunities instead of disappointments. Your energy goes into building rather than chasing. This change is liberating because it returns control of your happiness to the one person who should always have it. Ironically, when people stop trying to prove their worth, they often become far more impressive. Confidence grows naturally because it is based on accomplishment rather than approval. Happiness becomes more genuine because it comes from within rather than from external validation. Success becomes more meaningful because it reflects personal growth rather than a desire to impress someone else. The truth is that silence becomes most powerful when it is accompanied by visible growth. You do not need to announce your progress. You do not need to explain your value. You do not need to tell anyone what they lost. Your actions communicate everything that needs to be understood. And when your life becomes the proof of your worth, your silence stops being an absence of words and becomes a statement no one can ignore.